This has been your first proxy battle
since Canadian Pacific.
Since Canadian Pacific, which was a very, very different kind of campaign.
Yes.
Talk to us about this campaign. Did you have a great strategy for what ADP should do, but just the campaign was carried out badly?
No, I think we've executed a campaign extremely well. I mean, the difference here between Canadian Pacific is a company that vastly underperformed the market over an extended period of time. And it was viewed as a dog by all the shareholders. So we went in there, we got 90% shareholder support, we replaced 7 directors. This was a very different kind of campaign. ADP is a great company. The stock has beaten the stock market. It's vastly underperformed its direct competitors. There's a lot of opportunity for improvement at the business. And so we ran a campaign on improving the company's profitability and profit margins and addressing their weakness in their enterprise offering.
Would it have been better to decide you were just running for a board seat yourself? Why the 3-director slate? Why the minority slate?
Yeah, in retrospect, if I had won one director, we probably would have won. And I can explain the vote, because the company did mischaracterize the outcome. I received 31% support versus Eric Fast, who I ran against. The way it works is the directors that receive the 10 directors who received the most number of votes get on the boards. What I had to do is get to be seat number 10 and on the board. So I got 31% versus Eric Fast. However, Eric Fast got another 14% of shareholders who withheld their votes for him on the management proxy card. And it sounds very technical, but those shareholders were basically voting for me. And so for those of you unfamiliar with the way the proxy contests work, is a firm called ISS has enormous influence over the shareholder base, and a firm called Glass Lewis. Glass Lewis gave us their full support. ISS said, support Bill's election, but do so by withholding votes against Eric Fast.
Exactly.
And so the way we think about it is we had 31% of shareholders vote for me, 14% of shareholders support my election by withholding for Eric Fast. So that's 45% of the votes cast between me and the candidate that would have got me on the board. Whether you look at it as a 31% vote of support or 45% vote of support, that is a huge indication that shareholders believe in the strength of our campaign.
Absolutely.
Now, one last thing I want to point out is we were one shareholder shy of winning. We did not get Vanguard support. I respect their decision. But Vanguard was a swing vote. So the notion that this was some kind of a landslide victory, greatest victory in the history of proxy contest management characterization is completely false.
BlackRock supported you.
Yes, they did.
Second largest shareholder in ADP.
Yes, and a permanent and long-term and very highly respected shareholder. So the company has to be looking at this, and there is no board in America that takes even a 31% opposition vote not seriously. I mean, this is a very serious indication from shareholders that they viewed, there's not a shareholder who disagrees with our view that this company could be a lot more profitable, have a lot higher margins, and needs to address the problems it has in their enterprise segment.
Lisa Ellis from Sanford Bernstein was also on earlier saying that this whole campaign was a win-win for shareholders, because not only did the stock price move higher when you moved in, but it's gone down a tiny bit today, but really not much.
Actually, it's up today. And what's interesting is when the company came out and characterized the results, the market's reaction was the stock went down. I went on another network and I explained the vote outcome. We put out a press release so that people could understand the facts. The stock is now up today. And why is it up? Because people believe that the more influence we have at this company, the higher the probability that changes are going to get made. Now, the company's got 3 quarters. The next 3 quarters to demonstrate what they've committed to shareholders. They won the contest and they won fair and square, but they won because they committed to meaningfully higher margins. They committed to launching a product to address their losses in the enterprise space, and they committed to returning to growth. They had a very tepid quarter, as Lisa mentioned on your show, this past quarter, and they're expecting the growth to turn beginning kind of the middle of next year. If shareholders don't see those commitments met by the company, we'll be right back there, 3 quarters from now. 9 months from now is the nominating deadline for the next annual meeting.
We'll get to that in a second. I'm looking forward to speaking about it. Just want to mention the point that some large shareholders were angry that you put ADP through an expensive battle, and it's a company that's been very good to its shareholders. But you also did a lot of work behind the scenes on ADP, and you presented them with the results of this work.
I haven't met or heard from a so-called angry shareholder. In fact, every shareholder we met with on this contest, we met with as many shareholders as who would meet with us. We met with most of the top, or spoke to most of the top shareholders. Every one of them to a T said that we did incredible research research on the company, that it opened their eyes, it lifted the veil on ADP, it helped them understand the business. And by going through a proxy contest is an inherently healthy thing for shareholders and for management teams because it gets everyone to focus on the issues. And the CEO went out and met with a lot of shareholders. We did the same. We surfaced a whole bunch of issues about the company which weren't not as well known. Now the company has a chance to address those issues. And we're rooting for management. We want the company to succeed because my goal is not to win proxy contests. My goal is for the company to make business progress and succeed. If this management team can get it done and this board of directors can get it done without our having to do any more work other than a 90-day proxy contest, that's a huge win for us.
Well, and I guess you decided to go the proxy contest route because the last time you didn't go the proxy contest route, or you didn't go as activist, and maybe you regretted that.
Well, we like, as I mentioned, we've not run a proxy contest for board seats in 5 years. The last was Canadian Pacific. In each case since then, whether it was every case where we sought directors, Air Products, Zoetis, Chipotle recently, boards have been very accommodating. They've been open to listening to our ideas. The reason why we ran a proxy contest here is we were shut down, and the board was not willing to meet with us until the deadline expired, at which point we'd have to wait a year before putting up our directors. So the shareholders have been very supportive of this contest, and whether you call it a 31% vote or a 45% vote, which I think is the right way to think about, because those withhold votes against Mr. Fast were actually intended to be votes for us.
Yes, and you did put out a press release. We have a quote from your press release, but I do want to first of all bring in the perspective of ADP. It's only fair. The statement today put out by the CEO, Carlos Rodriguez, saying, quote, "This process has sharpened our focus on the importance of insightful strategic engagement with our investors, which over the past few months has given us a greater appreciation of our owners' perspectives on our business and growth plans. We plan to maintain an active and productive dialogue with shareholders as we continue to transform ADP's business." Have you spoken, Bill, with Carlos Rodriguez since the vote count was announced?
So I did go to the shareholder meeting, of course, and I went over and shook his hand. I did have an opportunity to make a statement at the meeting, and we put out our statement. We've not really had a chance to speak. I actually very much like the statement that he put out because it's exactly the point I've been making, which is that this contest has enabled the company to really engage with its owners and hear what its owners have had to say. And the owners have had to say a theme that is very consistent with what we've been talking about, which is the company needs to make progress on margins. ADP's margins are half one of its direct competitors' paychecks, and if you compare them segment by segment with each of its competitors, the company underperforms versus the competition. That message has been heard loud and clear by management, and they've got to come up with a new product so they have a competitive product in their enterprise business.
You have a 2% voting stake and 8.3% economic stake.
Yes.
Are you planning on making any changes?
We have no plans at the current moment to make changes to our stake in the company. I expect we'll be a very large shareholder over time. We always make changes to stakes based on capital flows. So if we have redemptions, we will reduce the position. If we have additions, we may add to the position. If the stock price moves up and down, we make some adjustments. But absent a fairly dramatic increase in the stock price, I expect we'll be a very large shareholder for a long time to come.
Have you had calls from your investors, any angry ones?
No.
What do you say to them? I mean, I presume you have had calls.
Actually, I think this proxy contest is a very important step in our creating value at ADP, and I think our investors will view it that way. This was a $97, $98 stock before our involvement. Today, it's a $112 stock. I think if the company delivers on the promises they've made during the proxy contest, then the stock's going to go a lot higher over the next 9 months. If the company fails to deliver, we mitigate the downside in the stock because people will expect us to run another campaign next year, get on the board of the company. Perhaps we should have only run one nominee this year. We wouldn't have gotten to this issue of two different, ISS recommending a withhold on one card so they can support us without supporting our other directors. But we've asked the company, we said, look, just let the record be clear, for next year's meeting, there should be a universal proxy card so shareholders can pick which directors they want, and there's no penalty for running more than one.
So you will still run the other two directors as well next year?
We'll see. I mean, again, it's a long way. I hope we don't have to run a proxy contest here. Hopefully this process and the issues that we've identified, plus what we will do over time, will get the company to where it needs to be.
On that point, if you believe there's value to unlock, which clearly you do, that's your whole argument, but you don't particularly believe in management or the way it's going about unlocking this value, why stay in?
So look, again, it's all based on what management can achieve.
I really believe in this management.
The results will speak for themselves. So if the company can make, the results have been disappointing, and certainly in the last 12 months of the business, the company has promised investors that growth is going to turn in the second half of this fiscal year, which is the first 2 quarters of next year's calendar year, and then beginning July 1, they're expecting a fairly dramatic acceleration in growth. I mean, they promised shareholders, they gave guidance for 6 to 7% revenue growth over the next 3 fiscal years, with the first year being 2 to 3%. Right? So the only way to get to 6 to 7% over 3 years is for growth to dramatically accelerate for the first quarter prior to the next annual meeting. If that doesn't happen and they don't have a very good story for it, we're going to get a lot of support from shareholders. But my goal here is not to get on the board. My goal here is to make money for our investors. The proxy contest is a vehicle to send a very powerful message to management with 31 or 45% support, depending on how you want to think about it. I mean, I think the most conservative way to look at it is we got 31% of the vote. That's a major, vote of confidence from shareholders for our ideas. If you include the votes against Mr. Fast, which were intended for us, it's a near majority. And had we had, one shareholder here, made the difference. And let me comment briefly. Obviously, I don't speak for any shareholder opposed to us, but we did hear from some who said, Bill, we agree with all of your ideas. We think you're entirely right on what needs to happen, but we've made a lot of money in the stock, and we think we owe it to management to give them another year. Well, let's give them 3 more quarters to prove that they can deliver what they committed to during the proxy contest. Thank you for getting them to make these commitments, but if they disappoint us, we'll be right with you come next year.
So you're not a director, but you're still an activist and still a shareholder. How active are you going to be with management over the next couple of months? Do you anticipate making a lot of calls? How much of your time is it going to take?
Yeah, we don't typically run around making a lot of calls to management. I do think it will be a very healthy thing for us to have an opportunity to sit down with Carlos, sit down with the senior team, once the temperature cools from a typical version of a proxy contest. We also intend to have an opportunity to sit with the board of directors. So we're going to be, most of our investments, many of our investments historically, we've been quite active without being in the boardroom. In recent years, we've actually chosen and been invited to join many boards. But we can be a very influential shareholder. And by the way, it's not just us. I heard Lisa Bernstein on your show talk about how this contest has raised a number of issues that every shareholder can now hold the company accountable. When Carlos goes into a meeting with shareholders, the first questions they're going to ask today are about how much progress are you making on margins? That 500 to 600 basis point commitment you made during the proxy contest. Show us that in the numbers. This enterprise software product that's going to win back market share that you talked to ISS about, that enable you to get more support from ISS. When is that coming out? What is its functionality? Show us a beta test of the product. Yes. And these are important questions the company's going to have to answer. We're
out of time, but I do have one last question. Given that you're not a director, will your mind start focusing a little bit elsewhere now? Because you can't be as passionate about this as you were. I mean, you've done all the work now anyway, so aren't you on to the next thing?
Actually, it's a very important point. So we've done a lot of work in the last 90 days. It's consumed pretty much 100% of my waking hours. But now the ball is in the other court. And it's really up to management and the board. They've kept me off the board.
Exactly.
So congratulations to them on their victory today.
So where will you look now?
But we're going to follow the progress of the company. We are building a stake in something new. Not likely to be an activist investment. Actually, it's one that we think is interesting, but more likely to be on the more passive side.
In the US or Europe?
It's a US company.
In what sector?
That we can't tell you. But this is a very important investment for us. We're going to see it through. We're not going anywhere.